My daughter posted photos online. House hunting for mom's new place, with my address tagged. Neighbors started calling to say goodbye. I wasn't moving anywhere. I called her and she said, "Mom, you're too old to live alone. We already found buyers." I smiled and made one phone call. The next day she was the one packing. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The phone rang again. I set my watering can down on the kitchen counter, the gentle patter of water on soil now a distant concern. That was the fifth call in an hour. Each one had been a variation on a theme I did not understand. I picked up the receiver, my fingers tracing its familiar, smooth plastic. Elena Green speaking. "Ellie, it's Martha from down the street." Her voice was thick, unsteady. "I just saw the news online. I'm so very sorry. We're going to miss you terribly." I leaned against the counter, the laminate cool through my sleeve. "Miss me, Martha? I'm not going anywhere." A wet chuckle came through the line. "Oh, don't be brave for my sake. It's okay. We all have to make these decisions sooner or later. It's just the neighborhood won't be the same." "I appreciate the sentiment," I said, my voice even. "But there's been a misunderstanding. I have made no decision." There was a pause. "But the photos your daughters post." Her words trailed off into awkward silence. "My daughter's post," I repeated, the phrase a cold stone in my stomach. "Thank you for calling, Martha. I have to go." I hung up the phone and stood perfectly still in my kitchen. The morning sun cut across the floor, illuminating the tiles I had mopped yesterday. My African violets sat on the windowsill, blooms a defiant purple against the white wood. Everything was in its place. Yet, something was profoundly out of place. The phone rang once more. I knew the number. Mr. Jenkins, my neighbor of 32 years. "Ellie," he said, his old voice grave, "you need to get on the computer, right now." "I don't use that thing unless I have to, Henry." "You have to." There was no mistaking his tone. It was the same one he'd used when my husband, Samuel, had passed. A tone of necessary, unpleasant fact. My computer was a desktop model in the small den I used as a reading room. It took several minutes to start up, the fan whirring like an agitated insect. I logged into my social media account, a thing I visited perhaps once a month to see pictures of old colleagues' grandchildren. The notification icon pulsed with a red number in the hundreds. My profile, usually a silent digital ghost, was alive with activity, but the center of it all was not on my page. It was on my daughter Vanessa's page. The post was pinned to the top. It was from 2 days ago. The first photo showed a bright, airy living room with beige walls, beige carpet, and a beige sofa. A vase of yellow flowers sat on a generic table. The caption read, "Sunset Haven has such lovely model units, so spacious and manageable." My breath caught in my throat. The second photo was of a small, sleek kitchen with stainless steel appliances and no visible cooking utensils. "Thinking Mom will love this modern kitchen. No more heavy pots and pans." The third photo was the one that made the room tilt. It was an exterior shot of a building that looked like a pleasant hotel. A sign read, "Sunset Haven Assisted Living and Retirement Community." Someone, likely Vanessa, had drawn a pink digital heart over the sign. The caption below the series of photos was written in her cheerful, efficient style. "House hunting for Mom's new place. Household, it's time for the next chapter. This lovely community will be perfect for her. So grateful we found this solution. Time for the next chapter, taking care of Mom family first." And there, tagged at the end of the post, was my home address. 1847 Maple Crest Drive. For the entire world, or at least her 742 friends and their extended networks to see. I scrolled down. The comments were a waterfall of approval. "What a wonderful daughter you are." "This is so sweet. She's lucky to have you looking out for her." "A beautiful place for her golden years." "Hard decisions, but you're doing the right thing." Heart emojis, clapping hands, praying hands. Not a single question. Not one person asked, "Does Ellie want to move?" Or "Is she okay with this?" The collective assumption was a solid, suffocating wall. It was a done deal. My life, my home, had been packaged, presented, and sold to a digital audience as a completed narrative. The chapter was already written, and I was just a character being moved to the next set. I placed my hands flat on the desk. The wood was solid, real. I focused on that sensation. I looked away from the screen to my actual living room, visible through the den's open door. My books filled the shelves Samuel had built. The rug was worn in the path from the sofa to the kitchen. A photograph of Vanessa at her college graduation sat on the mantel, her smile wide and full of future. This was my sanctuary. This was my history. And with a few clicks and a cheerful hashtag, my own child had issued a digital eviction notice. She had not discussed it with me. She had not asked me. She had informed the world, and the world's applause was her permission. The humiliation was a slow, cold seep. It was not the hot flash of shame, but something deeper and more corrosive. It was the realization that in my daughter's eyes, I had become a problem to be solved, an object to be managed. My competence, my autonomy, my quiet happiness here among my things and my routines was irrelevant to the story she wanted to tell about being a good daughter. I logged out of the account. The screen went dark, reflecting my own face back at me, the gray curls I kept neat, the lines around my eyes and mouth that spoke of 68 years of laughter and worry and love. I saw the shock there, and beneath it, a stirring of something else. The phone rang again. I did not answer it. I listened to it ring, a shrill sound in the silent house. I watched the sunlight move across my floor. I thought of Martha's tears, of Mr. Jenkins's grave warning. I thought of all the people who now believed I was being gently, kindly ushered out of my own life. The cold seep of humiliation began to crystallize. It formed a sharp, clear point in my chest. This was not sadness. It was not even anger yet. It was recognition. A line had been crossed. The public nature of it, the sheer presumption, was an act I could not ignore. I stood up. I walked back to the kitchen. I picked up the watering can and finished tending to my herbs on the windowsill. The basil needed pruning. I took my shears and made precise, clean cuts. The fragrant scent filled the air. I would not cry. I would not make a scene. But the woman who had raised a headstrong daughter, who had navigated a career, who had buried a husband and maintained a home alone for a decade, was not a woman who would accept this fate without response. The game, as they say, was on. But it was a game Vanessa did not yet know we were playing, and I had just decided to write the rules. The shears in my hand were steady. I completed the pruning, discarding the excess basil leaves into the compost bin. The action was methodical, a familiar rhythm that allowed my mind to settle. The initial shock had solidified into a single, focused purpose: to have a conversation. Not a confrontation, not yet. First, I needed to hear it from her directly. I did not call immediately. I made a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table, the one where Samuel and I had eaten thousands of meals, where I had helped Vanessa with her homework. I watched the afternoon light deepen across the floorboards. I waited until the calm inside me was not a pretense but a tool. Then, and only then, I picked up the phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and busy. "Hi, Mom, I was just about to call you. Did you see the photos? What did you think?" Her tone was so breezy, so utterly devoid of any awareness of transgression, that for a moment I was speechless. I took a slow breath. "I saw them, Vanessa. I also saw the caption. And I have been receiving calls from my neighbors all morning, wishing me well on my move." A brief pause. I could hear the faint clatter of a keyboard in the background. "Oh, that's so sweet of them. See, this is why it's time. That neighborhood is full of busybodies. At Sunset Haven, you'll have real privacy." "Vanessa," I said, my voice quiet but clear, "I am not moving to Sunset Haven. I was not aware I was considering it. Would you like to explain this post to me?" The keyboard sounds stopped. Her sigh was audible, the patient exhalation of someone dealing with a stubborn child. "Mom, we've talked about this. The house is too big for you. The stairs, the yard work, the maintenance, it's a burden. You're just not admitting it." "We have not talked about this," I stated. "You have mentioned, in passing, that the garden seems like a lot of work. I corrected you. I enjoy the garden. That is not a discussion about selling my home and placing me in a facility. It's not a facility, it's a community. And we have talked about it. Dad would have wanted. Do not, I interrupted, the words sharper than I intended. I moderated my tone. Do not tell me what your father would have wanted. You and I have not had a single conversation where you asked me my thoughts on moving. You have decided. You have announced it to the world. You even tagged my address. Why would you do that? For engagement, Mom. It's how things work now. People share stuff. Her voice took on a placating quality. Look, I know it seems sudden, but it's for your own good. We worry about you all alone in that big old house. I've already spoken to a very interested buyer from my office. He's looking for a character home like yours. He can pay cash. It's the perfect solution. The pieces clicked into place with a cold, final sound. The post was not just a suggestion. It was the opening act of a plan already in motion. She had spoken to a buyer. She had assessed my home as a commodity for her colleague. The public announcement was a pressure tactic, a way to make the decision a social fact before I could even protest. A heavy weight settled in my chest. It was the weight of her presumption. You have no authority to sell my house, Vanessa. Mom, be realistic. The house is in both your and Dad's names. I've looked into it. I'm your next of kin. I'm trying to help you navigate this. You're too old to be dealing with realtors and legal paperwork. Let me handle it. It's what family does. Each word was a small hammer blow. Too old. Let me handle it, for your own good. They were not words of care. They were words of dismissal. She had folded me into a narrative of decline, and in her mind, she was the heroic manager of it. I looked out the window at my garden. The rose bushes Samuel had planted for our 20th anniversary were budding. The lilac tree was heavy with blossoms. This was not a burden. This was my life. You have made a serious error in judgment, I said, my voice now devoid of all warmth. It was a librarian's voice, statting a factual correction. You have publicly humiliated me. You have assumed control over my life without my consent. You have done this because you believe I am incapable of managing my own affairs. That is a mistake. Mom, don't be dramatic. I'm trying to take care of you. Why are you being so difficult? Everyone else thinks it's a great idea. There is your problem, I said. You are more concerned with what everyone else thinks than with what I am telling you. I am telling you I am not moving. I am telling you to remove that post. I am telling you to cease any conversations about my property immediately. Another sigh, this one tinged with frustration. You're being emotional. You're not thinking clearly about your future safety. What if you fall? What if there's a storm and a tree comes down? You're not as young as you used to be. The condescension was a tangible thing, a thick syrup pouring through the phone line. I felt a flash of pure, hot anger, but I did not let it into my voice. I let it fuel the cold resolve beneath. My future safety is my concern, I replied. My clarity of thought is intact. I will not discuss this further with you now. You have your instructions. Remove the post. End the discussions. Goodbye, Vanessa. I hung up before she could respond. I placed the phone back in its cradle with precise control. My hand did not shake. The conversation played in my head. Her certainty, her patronizing logic, her appeal to an imaginary consensus. The worst part was the genuine bafflement in her tone when I resisted. She truly could not comprehend why I would not gratefully accept her solution. I stood up and walked to the living room. I sat in Samuel's armchair, the one I still kept by the fireplace. The fabric was worn soft. I ran my hand over it. This was not a house that was too much. It was a home that was exactly enough. It held me. It held my memories. It was not a placeholder until a beige apartment in Sunset Haven became available. The sadness came then, a deep, weary ache. It was not for the house, but for the relationship. My daughter saw me as a liability, a task on her to-do list to be efficiently managed and filed away. The love I felt for her was suddenly a complicated, painful thing, tangled with this new reality of disrespect. But the ache did not paralyze me. It transformed. It heated in the forge of her words, asterisk too old, let me handle it, for your own good asterisk, and was tempered into something hard and unyielding. The weight in my chest became a foundation. She believed I was incapable of strategy. She believed I would be overwhelmed by her decisive action. She believed the social pressure of her post and the inevitability of her plans would force my compliance. She was wrong. I am a retired librarian. My entire career was based on systematic research, on understanding complex systems, on finding precise information. I knew how to follow a thread to its source. I knew how to build a case, and I knew the value of a good reference. The anger was no longer a flash. It was a constant, low current powering my thoughts. It was not an emotion to be expressed, but a resource to be utilized. The game was indeed on, and her opening move had revealed her entire strategy: public pressure, assumed authority, and a fundamental underestimation of her opponent. I knew what my next move had to be. It was not a phone call to argue. It was not a social media post of my own. It was a different kind of call altogether, one to someone who understood rules, authority, and the power of legal fact. I remained in the chair until the last of the sunlight faded from the room. I did not cry. I planned. The hurt was real, but it was now compartmentalized, set aside to be examined later. For now, there was work to do. The first skirmish was over. The real battle was just beginning. The darkness in the living room was complete, but I did not turn on a lamp. I sat in the quiet, the outline of the familiar furniture a comfort against the turmoil of the day. The plan had formed in the silence, not as a burst of inspiration, but as the only logical next step. I needed expertise of a different kind. I needed an ally who spoke the language of consequences. I rose and went to the small, polished wood desk in the corner of the room. It had been Samuel's. I opened the top drawer where I kept important papers. Beneath the folder labeled tax documents was a slim leather case containing business cards. My fingers found the one I sought by touch alone: thick, creamy cardstock with sharp, embossed lettering. Sharon Miller-esque. Miller and Associates. Real estate law, estate planning, civil litigation. I had not spoken to Sharon in perhaps 6 months, but ours was a friendship that did not require maintenance. It was built on the solid ground of shared history, a foundation that could bear weight. We had met in a freshman economics class, 2 of only 3 Black women in the lecture hall. We had studied together, complained together, and later celebrated each other's careers, hers in law, mine in the quiet order of the library stacks. I picked up the kitchen phone and dialed the mobile number written in her own hand on the back of the card. It was late, but Sharon had always been a night owl. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice alert and professional. Sharon Miller. Sharon, it's Ellie Green. The tone shifted instantly. Ellie, what's wrong? She heard it in my voice, the tight control over something frayed. I need to talk, professionally, and as a friend. Can you meet me tomorrow? Name the time and place. My 10:30 is a conference call I can move. We agreed on 11 o'clock at the Steeping Leaf, a quiet tea room we'd frequented for years. I did not give details over the phone. Some things require face-to-face conversation. The next morning, I dressed with care. A simple navy blue dress, a single strand of pearls, my hair styled neatly. I wanted to present myself not as a wounded mother, but as a client. I arrived at the tea room 5 minutes early. Sharon was already there, seated at a corner table away from the window. She stood as I approached. She was a tall woman, her hair a magnificent cloud of silver white, her suit a severe and elegant black. She grasped my hands, her dark eyes scanning my face. You look steady, she said, a statement of assessment. I am steady, I replied, but I have been pushed. We sat. After ordering a pot of Earl Grey, I laid it out for her. I did not editorialize, I presented facts. The social media post, the tagged address, the calls from neighbors, the conversation with Vanessa, her stated reasons: too old, too much house for your own good, her revelation about speaking to a potential buyer. I slid my phone across the table, the offending post still displayed on the screen. Sharon put on her reading glasses. She scrolled. Her expression did not change, but a muscle in her jaw tightened. She read the comments. She handed the phone back to me. I see, she said. Her voice was calm, but it was the calm of a deep, still lake over cold depths. She has attempted a digital coup d'etat, and she has involved third parties in a transaction concerning property she has no legal authority to transact. She believes she has authority. She says the house is in mine and Samuel's names, and that is next of kin. Sharon waved a dismissive hand. Next of kin is irrelevant to property law without specific legal instruments, which I assume you have not granted her. I have not. Good. She sipped her tea, her mind clearly working. The post itself is a nuisance, an invasion of privacy. We could have it taken down, but the damage to your social standing is done. A public correction would be satisfying, but it is the property issue that is both the greater threat and our greatest opportunity. Opportunity? I asked. A small, sharp smile touched her lips. Ellie, you said the house is still in both your name and Samuel. Did you ever formally probate the will and clear the title into your name solely? I paused. The administrative tasks after Samuel's death had been a blur. His will left everything to me. The lawyer at the time handled it, I thought. Most people think it's automatic. It is not. The title likely still reads Samuel Green and Alina Green, joint tenants with right of survivorship. Upon his death, you became the sole owner in practice, but the title may not have been officially updated with the county recorder. It's a common oversight. It means the legal record is fuzzy. To a buyer, or more importantly, to a title company, it looks like a potential cloud. No reputable buyer would touch it without you first clearing that title. I understood. Vanessa's cash buyer would hit a wall. He would, but that is merely a defensive move. It stops her. It does not address the presumption. Sharon leaned forward. Here is the opportunity. We use this. We file a quiet title action. It's a straightforward legal procedure to formally and publicly update the county records to show you, Alina Green, as the sole and separate owner of the property. It severs any lingering legal connection to Samuel's estate. It makes your ownership ironclad and unambiguous. The concept was elegant. It was not an attack on Vanessa. It was a reinforcement of my own position. That would establish my legal authority beyond any doubt. Precisely. It turns her next of kin argument to dust. Furthermore, Sharon continued, her eyes gleaming with professional satisfaction, her discussions with a buyer presenting herself as having some authority could be construed as tortious interference. She is potentially liable. We won't sue her, of course, but we have that in our pocket. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity and power. It was not emotional. It was procedural. It used the system she thought was too complicated for me to navigate. What do you need from me? I asked. Your signature on a retainer agreement, a copy of Samuel's death certificate and your marriage license, the original deed. I'll handle the rest. The wheels will be in motion by this afternoon. I felt a surge of something potent, not happiness, but vindication. This was the antidote to the helplessness Vanessa had tried to impose. Do it, I said. Sharon nodded, pulling a slim tablet from her briefcase to begin making notes. There is another matter, the public humiliation, the narrative she has created. Legally, it's a softer issue. Socially, it is the wound. I am aware of that wound, I said quietly. The cure for a false narrative, Sharon said, not looking up from her tablet, is a truer, more powerful one that reasserts facts. We will handle the legal facts first, then we can consider the social ones. She looked at me. This is not just about keeping your house, Ellie. This is about reclaiming your narrative. Your daughter has written you into a story as a passive character. It is time for you to become the author again. I stirred my tea, watching the liquid swirl in the cup. The warmth of the porcelain seeped into my hands. The cold resolve from the night before now had a shape, a path, and a formidable guide. Thank you, Sharon. Don't thank me yet, she said, her smile returning. Just be ready. When people assume you are powerless, they reveal their own weaknesses. Your daughter has shown you hers. She believes in pressure and public opinion. We believe in paperwork and precedent. I know which foundation is stronger. We finished our tea. We spoke of other things, mutual friends, a new exhibition at the museum. It was a necessary return to normalcy. When we parted on the sidewalk, she gave my arm a firm squeeze. Go home, she said. Water your plants, read a book. Let the law work. I'll call you when there are papers to sign. I drove home. The sun was high. The familiar streets seemed clearer, sharper. The house awaited me, not as a problem, but as a fact I was about to make legally unassailable. The game had changed. I was no longer just a player. I now had the rulebook. Sharon's directive was a relief. I went home. I watered the plants. I read a book. The waiting was not passive. It was an active exercise in discipline. I tended to my routine as one might tend to a machine, ensuring every part was in good order for the task ahead. The house felt different now. It was no longer just my home. It was the subject of a quiet, legal campaign. 2 days after our tea, my phone rang. It was not Sharon, but a polite young man from her office. "Mrs. Green, Ms. Miller has asked me to coordinate the collection of your documents. Would this afternoon be convenient for a courier?" I said it would. I then went to the fireproof lockbox I kept on the top shelf of my bedroom closet. I retrieved the folder labeled House. Inside was the original deed, our marriage certificate, and Samuel's death certificate. The paper felt crisp, official. I laid them out on the kitchen table, aligning the edges neatly. I did not dwell on the memories they invoked. I assessed them as evidence. They were the factual bedrock of my claim. The courier arrived precisely at 2:00. I handed over the sealed envelope without ceremony. The transaction felt significant, the first concrete move in the counteroffensive. The following morning, Sharon called. "The title search is complete. Your intuition was correct. The title was never formally updated after Samuel's passing. The quiet title action is the necessary remedy. I've drafted the petition. Can you come to the office at 3 to sign?" "I'll be there," I said. Sharon's office was in a downtown building of steel and glass. Her space was a reflection of her, ordered, professional, and powerful without ostentation. The walls were lined with legal volumes and modern art. Her assistant ushered me into a conference room where Sharon waited, several documents laid out on the polished table. "Ellie," she said, gesturing to a chair, "let's review." She walked me through the petition. It was a dense document, but she translated the legalese into plain English. "This states the facts. You and Samuel own the property as joint tenants. He passed. You are the surviving tenant. The title remains in both names due to an administrative oversight. This action asks the court to formally recognize and record what is already true. You are the sole owner." I took the pen she offered. I signed my name on the indicated lines, Eleanor Marie Green, with a steady hand. The scratch of the pen was the only sound in the room. Each signature felt like the turning of a lock, securing a door. "Once this is filed," Sharon continued, gathering the signed pages, "the court will issue a notice. It's a formality, but it creates a public record. Anyone searching the title on your property will see this action pending, and then the final judgment. It will freeze any attempted sale in its tracks. No title company will ensure a transaction with a cloud like this." "And Vanessa's buyer?" I asked. Sharon allowed herself a small, tight smile. I took the liberty of having a colleague make an informal inquiry. The gentleman from Vanessa's office was indeed interested, but his realtor advised him that the title issue made the purchase complicated and potentially protracted. He has withdrawn his interest. He informed Vanessa this morning. I absorbed this. The first consequence, delivered not by me, but by the impersonal machinery of real estate law. How did she react? I don't have those details, but I imagine she is confused. Sharon leaned back in her chair. There is another matter. By speaking to a buyer, presenting herself as having some authority to facilitate a sale of your property, Vanessa has potentially committed tortious interference. She meddled in a business relationship, your potential sale of your own property, without legal justification. It is a cause of action. I shook my head. I don't want to sue my daughter. I didn't think you would, but it is leverage. It is a fact she will need to contend with if she chooses to escalate. For now, it remains in our file. She tapped the folder. The quiet title action is clean. It is defensive. It asserts your right. It does not attack her, though its effect will feel like one to her. I understood the distinction. It was crucial. I was not launching a missile. I was raising an impenetrable shield. Her plans would shatter against it through their own inherent flaws. What are the next steps? I asked. The court will process the filing. It will take a few weeks for the judgment. In the meantime, live your life. The law is now working for you. The momentum has shifted. I left her office feeling a peculiar sense of calm. The anger was still there, a banked fire, but it was no longer my primary source of heat. It had been replaced by the steady current of a process. I had taken the amorphous hurt and the sense of violation and had channeled them into a series of documents, signatures, and filings. I had made my response tangible. That evening, as I was preparing a simple dinner, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Vanessa's name. I watched it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello, Vanessa." "Mom," her voice was strained, trying for lightness and missing. "I just heard from Mark, the buyer. He said there's some kind of title problem with the house. He said his realtor told him to back off. What's that about?" I stirred the soup on the stove. "I wouldn't know. I'm not selling the house, so I haven't spoken to any buyers or their realtors." But he was so eager. "Did you say something to scare him off?" "I have said nothing to him. Perhaps the professionals he hired did their jobs and discovered a legal reality you chose to overlook." I kept my tone neutral, factual. A frustrated sigh came through the line. "This is so complicated. I was trying to make this easy for you." "You were trying to make a decision for me. Those are different things. The complications you are encountering are the natural result of that error." I turned the stove burner to low. "I have to go, Vanessa. My dinner is ready." I ended the call. I stood in my kitchen, the smell of vegetable soup filling the air. The room was warm, lit by the under-cabinet lights. Everything was in its place. The signed documents in Sharon's office were now an extension of this place, a legal affirmation of its stillness, its permanence. The paper warfare was underway. The first shots were not loud, but they were decisive. They were printed on legal paper, filed with a court clerk, and sent via formal notice. They were the kind of weapons a retired librarian knew how to wield: research, documentation, and the quiet, unassailable power of the truth. The battlefield was no longer social media. It was the county courthouse, and on that field I was now properly armed. The soup was simple, but it was exactly what I wanted. I ate at the kitchen table, the quiet of the house a companion. The phone call with Vanessa was a closed matter. The legal process was in motion. There was nothing to do but wait, and I have always been proficient at waiting. The following days took on a deliberate, peaceful rhythm. I woke at my usual time. I made coffee. I dressed in my gardening clothes, old slacks, and a sturdy shirt. The morning air was cool and carried the scent of damp earth. I worked in the front flower beds, weeding and turning the soil. The physical labor was a comfort. My hands knew the work. My back, though it protested a bit, was strong enough. This was not a burden, it was a privilege. Mr. Jenkins emerged from his house across the street, holding 2 mugs. He walked over slowly, his steps careful on the sidewalk. "Thought you might need a break," he said, offering one of the mugs. I wiped my hands on my trousers and accepted it. The coffee was hot and bitter, just the way I liked it. "Thank you, Henry." He leaned against my low garden wall, looking at the house. "The buzz has died down some. Martha called me. She feels a fool for jumping to conclusions." She shouldn't. The conclusion was presented to her as fact. "You're being kind. Most folks are just embarrassed. They see now it was premature." He sipped his coffee. "Vanessa hasn't taken that post down." "I am aware." "She's stubborn, gets it from you." He said it without judgment. "Perhaps, but my stubbornness is currently engaged in understanding property law. Hers is engaged in ignoring it." I took a drink. "The situation is resolving itself." He gave a slow nod. "Good, this is your place. It's wrong what she did." He paused. "If you need a character witness for anything, you know where I am." "I appreciate that, Henry." He left me to my weeding. His visit was a barometer. The neighborhood's initial pity was curdling into a mixture of embarrassment and quiet support for me. They were beginning to question the narrative. Later that afternoon, I walked to the small grocery store 3 blocks away. Mrs. Lawson from 2 streets over spotted me in the produce section. She hurried over, her cart clattering. "Ellie, I've been thinking of you. All that business online, it must be so stressful. Are you really moving to Sunset Haven? My cousin Edith is there. She says the pudding is terrible. I selected a firm avocado. I have no plans to move, Carol. Things aren't quite what they seem. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh, I see. She leaned inconspiratorially. Family trouble. A temporary misunderstanding, I said, my tone leaving no room for further inquiry. How is your grandson? The subject was successfully changed. I completed my shopping. Each interaction followed a similar pattern. Concern, a probing question, my calm deflection, and a redirection. I was not hiding. I was controlling the flow of information. The phrase, things aren't quite what they seem, became my refrain. It was true, and it seeded doubt without me having to explain a thing. At home, I put the groceries away. I read a novel for an hour. I called Sharon for an update. The court had accepted the filing. The process was underway. She told me to continue being boringly normal. It was excellent legal strategy, she said. It established a pattern of stability. 3 days after the buyer withdrew, Vanessa called again. It was early evening. I was repairing a loose button on a cardigan. Mom, her voice was tight, controlled. Mark's realtor called me. She said the title issue is substantive and that any sale would be delayed for months at least. She said the owner, you would have to clear it first. What did you do? I set the cardigan aside. I consulted a lawyer. She identified an administrative error in the property records and is correcting it. It's a standard procedure. You lawyered up against me? The hurt in her voice was sharp, but beneath it was a flicker of something new, apprehension. I engaged counsel to protect my legal interests, which were being threatened. My actions are in response to a situation you created. This is insane. You're making everything so hard. I was trying to help you secure your future. My future is secure, Vanessa. It is here. Your help, as you call it, involved attempting to dispose of my present without my consent. That is not help. That is appropriation. I kept my voice level, instructional. The legal correction will proceed. It will take some weeks. I suggest you use that time to reflect. Reflect on what? On how you're being irrational. On the difference between care and control. On the meaning of respect. On the fact that I am not a chapter in your story for you to close. I paused. The post is still up. Every day it remains, it is a public statement of your error. That is your choice to make. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Are you threatening me? I am stating a fact. Good night, Vanessa. I hung up. The button waited for me. I threaded the needle and made small, precise stitches, securing the button firmly in place. My hand was steady. The week continued. I baked a loaf of banana bread and took half to Mr. Jenkins. I attended my book club where we discussed the novel I had finished. The conversation was lively, about characters and plot, not about my personal life. It was a relief. I weeded the backyard vegetable patch. The lettuce was coming in nicely. The calm I cultivated was not an act. It was a deep, strategic stillness. I was allowing the tension of the situation to stretch, like a rubber band, with Vanessa on one end and the immutable facts of law on the other. I was in the middle, a fixed point. Every normal thing I did, every weed pulled, every book read, every loaf of bread shared, was a reinforcement of that fixed point. It was evidence of a life that was not in crisis, not in decline, but in deliberate, peaceful progress. Vanessa's calls became less frequent. The silence from her direction was louder than her arguments had been. It was the sound of her confusion, of her plans hitting a wall she did not understand. My life was business as usual, but the air in my quiet house was charged with the silent, humming energy of a countdown. The legal machinery was turning, and I knew, with cold certainty, that Vanessa's version of reality was about to collide with mine. The calm was the surface of the water. Beneath it, the current was moving, and it was moving in my favor. The calm held for 9 days. I know because I marked them on the kitchen calendar with a small, neat check. Each check was a day of peace in my home, a day the legal process advanced unseen, a day Vanessa's post remained online as a monument to her mistake. On the morning of the 10th day, my phone rang. It was Sharon. "It's done," she said, no greeting necessary. The sign was planted an hour ago. The online listing went live simultaneously. I have a friend at the agency who ensured the timing. Thank you, Sharon. The description is perfect. Minimal, factual, and slightly pointed. Do you want to see it? I think I'd like to see the sign first, I said. The physical object. I dressed in a simple linen shirt and trousers. I drove the 20 minutes to Vanessa's neighborhood, an upscale development of large, newer homes with manicured lawns and 3-car garages. Her house was a 2-story colonial with a perfectly green lawn and hydrangeas lining the walkway. It was a house that spoke of effort and presentation. I parked my sensible sedan a few houses down, under the shade of a maple tree. I rolled down the window. The air here smelled of freshly cut grass and money. And there it was, staked firmly into the pristine turf of her front yard, right next to the sidewalk. A bright professional for sale sign. The agency's logo was bold. Below it, a line read, "Lovely home owned by someone ready to downsize, perfect for a growing family's needs." It was a masterstroke. The phrasing mirrored the condescending narrative she had used about me. Ready to downsize instead of too old for a big house. Perfect for a growing family's needs instead of too much space. It was a real estate listing, but it was also a precise, public reflection of her own logic back at her. As I watched, the front door of the house flew open. Vanessa stood in the doorway, still in her yoga clothes, her phone clutched in her hand. She stared at the sign as if it were a poisonous mushroom that had sprouted overnight. She took a few steps out onto the walkway, her head swiveling left and right as if looking for the perpetrator. She walked right up to the sign and gripped the top of it, giving it a shake. It was firmly planted. She stepped back, her hands going to her hair. She looked at her phone, then back at the sign. Her entire body was a portrait of stunned disbelief. I observed this with clinical detachment. There was no thrill, no surge of petty satisfaction. There was only a cold acknowledgement of symmetry. She had used public declaration as a weapon. Now she was experiencing its edge. My own phone buzzed, a text from Sharon with a link. I opened it. It was the digital listing on the agency's website. There were professional photos of Vanessa's interior, her sleek kitchen, her formal living room, her master suite. The description was concise. It noted the excellent schools, the mature landscaping, and the fact that the owner was motivated and ready for a change. At the bottom of the listing, the agent had tagged the property's location. And in a move of sheer genius, the agent's public profile included a link to her other great listings, one of which was a promotional page for Sunset Haven Retirement Community. The connection was subtle, but it was there for anyone who looked. The final touch was the contact information. It listed the agent, a woman named Brenda, and in the field for owner, it simply said, Vanessa Carter. Her name was on it. Her home was now a commodity in a narrative she did not control. I saw Vanessa on her lawn, stabbing at her phone screen. She was calling someone, her free hand gesticulating wildly. I imagined the conversation, frantic calls to the realty agency, demands to know who authorized this, threats of legal action. I knew what she would find. Sharon's friend Brenda would politely, professionally, explain that she had received clear instructions and valid documentation from the homeowner, Vanessa Carter, expressing a desire to list the property. There would be an email, perhaps even a digitally signed form. Sharon was thorough. I watched for 5 more minutes. Vanessa paced. She took a picture of the sign. She called someone else. Her movements were jerky, uncoordinated by the sheer violation of it. This was her sanctuary, her testament to her own success. And now it was publicly, politely for sale. The presumption was breathtaking, wasn't it? I finally saw her look up and down the street, a paranoid sweep. Her gaze passed over my car without recognition. I was just an older woman in a parked car, invisible, the ultimate insult to her sense of control. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I saw her sink down onto her front steps, head in her hands. The bright sign stood behind her, a silent, cheerful announcement of her new reality. I drove back to my neighborhood, to my home with its clear title pending and its unlisted status. The difference between our 2 houses was now starkly defined. Mine was a fortress, its ownership being legally solidified. Hers was suddenly, shockingly vulnerable. The midpoint had been reached. The predator who had been so confidently circling now found a target painted on her own den. The game was no longer about her managing my life. It was now about her explaining her own. The quiet power had shifted completely. My response was no longer just defense. It was a mirror, held up with steady hands, forcing her to see the reflection of her own actions. The for sale sign wasn't just a placard, it was a question. And for the first time, Vanessa was the one who had to provide the answer. I returned home to my own quiet street. The contrast was almost physical, like stepping from a stage into a private library. I changed into my gardening clothes again. There was weeding that needed doing in the side yard, where the lilies were struggling against the encroaching grass. The work was methodical, pulling the invaders out by the root, feeling the satisfying resistance give way. The phone in my pocket began to vibrate before I had cleared a square foot. I knew who it was. I finished extracting a particularly stubborn clump of crabgrass, shook the soil from its roots, and dropped it into the bucket. Then I pulled out the phone. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. I answered. "What have you done?" The words were a shriek, stripped of all pretense, all control. I held the phone slightly away from my ear. "Vanessa, you'll need to speak clearly. I can't understand you." A ragged, furious breath. "My house. There is a for sale sign on my lawn. Someone listed my house. The agent says she has paperwork from me. What have you done?" I straightened up, brushing the dirt from my knees. "I haven't done anything to your house, Vanessa. I'm in my garden." "Don't you play innocent with me. This is you. This has your fingerprints all over it. That lawyer friend of yours, how could you do this? This is my home." I walked slowly toward the backyard tap to rinse my hands. The cool water ran over my skin. "It seems like a disruptive situation. I can understand why you're upset." "Upset I'm being violated. Strangers could come to my door. My address is online. How did you even get the paperwork? This is illegal." "I wouldn't know about the paperwork," I said, my tone even. "But if an agent has documentation, perhaps you should review it. There are many forms one signs without reading closely." I let the implication hang, a direct echo of her assumption that I would sign away my home based on her say-so. A choked sound came through the phone. You plotted this, to get back at me." "To get back at you," I repeated, as if considering the concept. "No, I've been focused on the quiet title action for my own property. You remember the legal correction you found so complicated." I paused, turning off the tap. "But seeing your sign does make one think." "Think about what?" she spat. "Well," I began, adopting a tone of mild, analytical concern. It was the tone she used when explaining my life to me. "With all your expressed worry about me living alone in a big house, it must be a terrible burden for you as well. Your house is quite large. That lawn looks very demanding. And you're so busy with your career, your social obligations. All that maintenance, all that space for just you and David, it must be too much." Silence, a dead, hollow silence on the other end. I continued, my voice gentle, reasonable. "I just thought, if it's such a concern for me, it must be an even bigger concern for you. You're not getting any younger either, dear. Maybe a nice, modern apartment would be less for you to manage. No stairs, no yard work, very secure. It's for your own good." I heard a sharp gasp. They were her words, her logic, delivered back to her with the same patronizing care. "You're insane," she whispered, but the force was gone. It was the sound of someone staring into a mirror and seeing a stranger. "I'm applying your own principles, Vanessa. Consistency is important. You were so eager to apply them to my life, I assumed you'd find them just as sensible when applied to yours." I walked back to my gardening bucket. "The listing says you're ready to downsize." That sounds like a positive choice. A next chapter. You should be proud of taking such a proactive step for your future safety and comfort. "Take it down," she said, her voice breaking. "Make them take it down, please." The please was new. It was small and born of desperation, not respect, but it was there. "I have no authority over your property decisions, Vanessa," I said, echoing her own earlier deflection about my house. "You'll have to take that up with the real estate agent. I'm sure, given your experience in these matters, you'll find a way to sort it out." "Mom," the word was a plea now, stripped of all its former certainty. I have to finish my weeding, I said, my voice returning to its normal, factual register. The lilies need the space. Good luck with your situation. I ended the call. I placed the phone on the garden bench. I knelt back down in the soil. My hands found the next weed. I gripped it at the base and pulled. The roots came up cleanly. The conversation replayed in my mind. Her fury, her fear, her dawning comprehension. There had been no satisfaction in hearing her pain, but there had been a profound sense of correction. A moral and strategic balance had been restored. She had spoken to me as a problem. I had spoken back to her in the exact same language. The lesson was not in the words, but in the experiencing of them. The sun was warm on my back. A bee buzzed among the lavender. My garden was coming into its summer fullness. The quiet title action was proceeding. The sign stood in her yard. The mirror was held. For the first time since seeing her initial post, I felt the knot of tension in my shoulders begin to loosen. It was not over. There would be another conversation, face to face. Terms would need to be set. But the power dynamic, so violently upended by her social media announcement, had been methodically, irrevocably reversed. She was no longer the manager of my fate. She was a petitioner, and I held the keys to the solution she desperately needed. I worked until the side bed was clear. The lilies stood free, their green stalks reaching for the sun. They had the space they needed now. I gathered my tools, my bucket of weeds. The phone on the bench was silent. I went inside to wash up, ready for whatever came next, but no longer waiting for it. The next move was hers. The silence after that call lasted for 27 hours. I know because I noted the time. I went about my routines. I did not wait by the phone. I assumed she was engaged in frantic activity, calling lawyers, screaming at realtors, discovering the legal and bureaucratic walls Sharon had so expertly erected. The paperwork would be a masterpiece of forgery, so precise it would be indistinguishable from her own signature, backed by a trail of electronic breadcrumbs. Sharon believed in thoroughness. On the afternoon of the second day, my doorbell rang. I was not surprised. I had expected this. I looked through the peephole. Vanessa stood on my porch. She looked diminished. Her shoulders were slumped, her usually sharp business attire was rumpled, and her eyes were red-rimmed. Behind her stood Sharon, a portrait of calm authority in a charcoal suit, her briefcase in hand. I opened the door. "Mom," Vanessa said, the word a dry croak. "Eleanor," Sharon nodded. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They entered my living room, the same room where I had first received those bewildering goodbye calls. Vanessa's gaze darted around, taking in the familiar space, the books, the photographs, the worn armchair, as if seeing it for the first time. She did not sit until I gestured to the sofa. Sharon took the armchair opposite. I remained standing, my back to the fireplace. "I assume you've had a difficult couple of days," I began. Vanessa's composure cracked. "Difficult? My house is listed for sale. I've had 3 showing requests. My colleagues are asking me if I'm being transferred. The realtor won't take it down without owner authorization and claims I am the owner who authorized it. It's a nightmare." "It is disruptive to have your life decided for you by others, isn't it?" I said. She flinched. Sharon remained silent, an observer. "Make it stop," Vanessa pleaded, looking from me to Sharon. "Please, I'll take down the post. I'll tell everyone it was a mistake. Just make the sign go away." "It's not that simple, Vanessa," Sharon said, her voice cool and professional. She opened her briefcase and extracted a folder. "Before we discuss terms, we need to establish facts. Your mother's quiet title action is proceeding without issue. Within a month, the court will issue a final judgment declaring her the sole, legal, and unambiguous owner of this property. Any claims of next-of-kin authority are now, and will forever be, null." Vanessa stared at the folder, as if it contained a venomous snake. Sharon continued. "Furthermore, your discussions with a potential buyer for this property, without power of attorney or any legal standing, constitute tortious interference. Your mother has chosen not to pursue this claim, but it exists. It is a demonstrable legal wrong." "I was trying to help," Vanessa whispered, but the words had no force. "The law does not recognize help that involves the attempted disposal of another person's assets without consent," Sharon replied evenly. I finally sat in Samuel's armchair. I looked at my daughter, this stranger full of fear and unraveling certainty. You thought you were managing a problem. I am not a problem, Vanessa. I am your mother. And I am a person with legal rights, a history, and a will of my own. You ignored all of that. She swallowed hard, looking down at her hands. I thought I knew better. That was your first mistake. Your second was doing it publicly, thinking the applause of strangers would validate you and pressure me. I leaned forward slightly. You humiliated me. You told the world I was incapable. You turned my home into a pity project for your social feed. Tears spilled over onto her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. I'm sorry. I believe you are sorry for the consequences. I need to know if you are sorry for the action. I paused. The sign on your lawn will be removed. Sharon can make a call and it will be gone within the hour. But there are conditions. She looked up, hope and wariness mixing in her expression. What conditions? 2, I said, holding up my fingers. First, you will make a new post, a public retraction. You will state clearly and without qualification that you made a serious error in judgment, that you announced a decision about my life without my knowledge or consent, that you apologize for the embarrassment and distress you caused me, that you have learned to respect my autonomy. You will not make excuses. You will not say, we decided. You will say, I was wrong. She paled, a public confession, the opposite of her curated, celebratory post. It would be a humiliation of her own. And the second, she asked, her voice thin. The second is a signed agreement. You, your husband, and your children will come here for a family dinner once a month. For 1 year, we will eat at this table. We will talk. You will listen. We will discuss your life, my life, the children's lives. You will not make decisions for me. You will not offer unsolicited solutions. We will practice speaking with each other, not for asterisk each other. She was silent for a long moment. The first condition was a bitter pill for her pride. The second was a commitment to a new way of being. And if I don't agree? Sharon answered. Then the listing remains. The showings continue. Your mother's quiet title action proceeds, cementing her ownership and highlighting your legal overreach. And we retain the option to file the interference claim, which could have financial and reputational consequences. The choice is yours. It was not a choice at all. It was a lesson, presented with clarity. She could cling to her shattered pride and face escalating consequences, or she could accept the terms of peace and begin to rebuild something different. Vanessa looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. She saw the woman in the chair, not as an aging mother in need of management, but as a force that loved her, but a force that would not be moved. I'll make the post, she said, the words barely audible, and we'll come to dinner. I nodded. Sharon has the agreement drafted. You can sign it before you leave. Once you send me a link to the apology post, she will make the call about the sign. It was clinical. It was contractual. It was necessary. The emotions were too raw, too complex to handle any other way. This was the architecture of a new relationship, and it had to be built on a solid foundation of acknowledged truth and clear boundaries. Vanessa signed the single-page agreement at my kitchen table, her hand unsteady. Sharon witnessed it. The document was simple, a commitment to monthly dinners, with a clause stating that any discussion of my living arrangements or major life decisions would be initiated by me. It was a rule book for respect. She left without saying much else. She looked broken but not destroyed, humbled but not obliterated. It was the correct starting point. Sharon stayed for a moment after the door closed. She'll make the post. The shame will be acute, but it's the only way to disinfect the wound she caused. I know, I said. You were formidable, Ellie. I was factual, I corrected. The facts were on my side. She smiled, a real one this time. They always are. I'll call about the sign now. It'll be gone before dusk. I walked her to the door. The late afternoon sun slanted across my porch. The terms of peace were set. The war was over. What came next would be the harder work, the peace itself. Sharon's prediction was correct. The sign on Vanessa's lawn was gone by 7 that evening. She texted me a photograph of the empty spot of grass, a small, dark rectangle of disturbed soil, the only evidence. I did not reply. The physical removal was the easier part. The digital correction was still pending. I did not check her social media profile. To do so would feel like watching a surgical procedure. Instead, I waited. I trusted the leverage of the signed agreement and the very real threat of the reinstated listing. Vanessa was many things, but she was not irrational about her own self-interest. The humiliation of the sign had been a potent teacher. The next morning, my doorbell rang. It was Mr. Jenkins, holding his tablet computer carefully in both hands, as if it were a fragile artifact. "Ellie," he said, his expression serious, "you need to see this." I let him in. We sat in the living room. He navigated on the tablet for a moment, then handed it to me. "It's Vanessa's page." On the screen was a new post, pinned to the top. It had been uploaded 2 hours prior. There were no photos of model homes. There was only a block of text. I read it silently. "To my friends, and especially to our family friends and neighbors, asterisk. I owe my mother, Elena Green, and many of you, a profound and sincere apology. Last week, I posted about finding a new home for my mom. I was wrong to do that. I made a serious error in judgment. I announced a decision about her life without her knowledge, without her consent, and without a single conversation with her about what she wants. I caused my mother significant embarrassment and distress. I also misled many of you, for which I am truly sorry. My actions were born from a place of care, but they were executed with presumption and a lack of respect. My mother is a capable, independent woman. She knows her own mind and her own needs. It is not my place to manage her life or to make public announcements about it. I have learned a hard lesson about autonomy and respect. The previous post has been deleted. I am sorry for the confusion and hurt I have caused. Please direct any well wishes or questions directly to my mom. This was my mistake, and I own it. Vanessa asterisk. I read it twice. The language was stiff in places, the tone awkward, as all public apologies are. But it contained the required elements: a clear admission of error, a specific account of the wrong, an apology to me and to the community, and a statement of learning. It used the word "I" repeatedly. It did not say "we" or make excuses. It was, as I had demanded, a retraction. I handed the tablet back to Mr. Jenkins. "Thank you for showing me." He studied my face. "It's a good apology, not flowery, seems real." "It meets the requirements," I said. He chuckled, a dry sound. "You sound like a teacher grading a paper." "In a sense, I am." We sat for a moment. Then he said, "The comments are different this time." I had not scrolled down. I had no desire to see the reaction. I imagine they are. "A lot of people are saying it takes courage to admit you're wrong. Some are saying they wondered about it at the time. Martha Benson wrote, 'We should all listen to our elders more.'" He scrolled. "There's a lot of support for you, Ellie. It's corrected." That was the word. Corrected. The false narrative had been publicly, formally stricken from the record and replaced with a statement of truth. The social ledger was being balanced. My phone buzzed on the side table, a text from Vanessa. It contained only a link to the post, no additional message. I did not click it. I knew what it was. I texted back, "I have seen it. Thank you. The agreement is satisfied." A moment later, a single word reply, "Okay." The transaction was complete. The terms of peace had been met. The war was officially over. There was no fanfare, no emotional reconciliation. There was only the quiet settling of accounts. Mr. Jenkins left a short while later, taking his tablet and the new neighborhood gossip with him. I stood at my living room window, looking out at the quiet street. The crisis had passed. The story that had begun with pitying goodbye calls had ended with a public apology and a signed contract for future dinners. The narrative arc was complete. I felt a hollow space where the anger and tension had been. It was not happiness, but a sort of weary peace. The victory was not sweet, it was necessary. It was the restoration of order. I thought about Vanessa, sitting in her now unlisted house, having exposed her error to her entire social world. The humility she was feeling would be a raw, painful thing, but it was the only soil in which something new could grow. You cannot build respect on a foundation of condescension. The old foundation had to be broken up first. My phone rang again. It was Sharon. "The post is adequate," she said without preamble. "The sign is gone. The title judgment is on track. Is the signed agreement in your possession?" "It is." "Then our work is done. Legally, you are secure. Socially, you are vindicated. The rest is personal." "Thank you, Sharon, for everything." "It was my professional pleasure. Call me for the next book club meeting." I hung up. The house was very quiet. The morning sun fell across the floor in a bright rectangle. I considered my options. I could garden. I could read. I could finally finish organizing the upstairs closet. Instead, I went to the kitchen. I took out a notebook and a pen. I sat at the table. I began to draft a menu for a Sunday dinner. It was a practical task. It was a forward-looking task. It was the first action under the new terms of our relationship. The lesson had been delivered, and it had been learned. The public record was set straight. My home was mine, legally and socially. The next chapter was not about moving to Sunset Haven. It was about turning the spare room into a painting studio. It was about monthly dinners. It was about living my life on my own terms, with my family relearning how to be around me. I wrote down roast chicken and herb stuffing. Concrete things, a place to start. The menu was a simple one: roast chicken with lemon and herbs, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans from the garden, and a pear tart I had made that morning. I set the table with my everyday dishes, the ones that were chip-resistant and familiar. I did not use the fine china. This was not a celebration. It was the first meeting under new rules. At precisely 5 o'clock, the appointed time, a car pulled into my driveway. I watched from the kitchen window. Vanessa emerged first, then her husband David, and then the children Sophie and Leo. They were all dressed neatly, as if for a formal occasion. Vanessa carried a bouquet of flowers, a tight bundle of grocery store lilies. She paused on the walkway, looking up at the house. I could not see her expression. I went to the front door and opened it before they could ring the bell. "Come in," I said. They filed in, a quiet procession. Sophie, who was 10, gave me a quick, shy hug. Leo, 7, mumbled a hello. David nodded, his face carefully neutral. "Ellie, thank you for having us." Vanessa held out the flowers. "These are for you." "Thank you," I said, accepting them. "They're cheerful. You can put your things on the bench there." An awkward silence settled in the hallway. They stood, unsure. I realized they were waiting for instructions. The old pattern was broken, and they did not know the new steps. "Vanessa, you can help me in the kitchen. David, the children can show you the board games in the den if they'd like. Dinner will be about 40 minutes. The directive broke the stillness. David shepherded the kids toward the den. Vanessa followed me into the kitchen. She stood by the counter, watching as I checked the chicken. "What can I do?" she asked. "You can trim the ends off the green beans. The colander is in the sink." She moved to the sink, finding the beans and the bowl. She began to work, her movements precise and focused. The only sound was the snip of the stems and the quiet roar of the oven. "The house looks nice," she said after a moment. "It's the same as always." "I know," she paused. "The legal thing, is it finished?" "The judgment came through yesterday. The title is clear. The house is mine, solely." She nodded, not looking up from the beans. "Good, that's good." I stirred the potatoes. "How have things been at your house, since the sign came down?" She let out a short breath, not quite a laugh. "Quiet. A few people asked about the apology post. I told them the truth, that I'd made a mistake. It was uncomfortable." I imagine it was. "It was necessary," she said, the words sounding rehearsed but sincere. She finished the beans and looked at me. "What else?" "You can set the water to boil for these. The pot is there." She filled the pot and placed it on the stove. We worked in silence for several minutes, a parallel activity. It was not the easy companionship of the past, but it was not hostile. It was procedural. It was a start. When David and the children came back into the kitchen, drawn by the smell of food, the atmosphere loosened slightly. Leo talked about winning at checkers. Sophie asked if she could pick some herbs from the garden for the table. I gave her permission, and she darted outside. We sat down to eat. The initial stiffness was palpable. The clink of cutlery was loud. Then Sophie said, "Grandma, your beans are better than Mom's." Vanessa's head jerked up, but I spoke first. "That's because they're from the garden out back. They're fresher. Your mother's would taste the same if she had a garden." Sophie considered this. "We could plant some in our yard." David said, "That's an idea, Soph. We could try a small bed." A normal conversation about gardens. The tension eased another degree. During a lull, while passing the potatoes, I said, "I've been thinking about the spare room, the one that was your father's study." Vanessa looked at me alert. "Yes. I'm considering turning it into a proper painting studio. The light is excellent in the afternoon. I haven't painted in years, but I think I'd like to take it up again." There was a beat of silence. I saw the automatic reaction flit across Vanessa's face, the assessment, the calculation of practicality, the potential objections about mess or unused supplies. But she caught herself. She took a breath. "What kind of painting?" she asked. "Watercolors, initially. Landscapes, perhaps some botanical studies of the garden." "You always were good at drawing," David offered. "It's a skill that might come back. I'll need to clear out the old filing cabinet first. That's a project for next week." Vanessa listened. She did not offer to help clear it. She did not suggest a better use for the room. She simply said, "The light in there is very good." It was a small sentence, but it was an acknowledgement. She had heard my statement about my own plans and had responded to the content, not tried to manage it. The rest of the meal passed with talk of school, of work, of a movie the children wanted to see. It was surface level, but it was conversation. No one mentioned Sunset Haven. No one discussed my future care. The agreement was holding. After dessert, Vanessa and David cleared the plates. I made coffee. The children asked to watch television in the den, and we allowed it. The adults returned to the living room. We sat. The quiet was companionable now, tired from the effort of the evening. Vanessa sipped her coffee, looking around the room, her gaze lingering on the photographs. "I am sorry, Mom," she said, not looking at me. "Not just because I had to be. I am sorry for what I did, for not seeing you." I nodded. "I know. Though the method you used, it was harsh." "It was proportional," I said. "You issued a public eviction notice. I issued a public lesson. Both had real-world consequences. The scale was equal." She met my eyes then, and finally I saw not fear or resentment, but a weary understanding. "It was." David shifted in his seat. "We should get the kids home. School night." They gathered their things. The children gave me proper hugs goodbye. At the door, Vanessa hesitated. "Next month, same time." "The last Sunday of the month," I confirmed. "I'll let you know the menu." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Okay." I closed the door behind them. I listened to the car start and drive away. The house settled back into its silence, but it was a different silence than before. It was not the silence of isolation, but the silence of a space that had been respectfully shared and then returned to its owner. I washed the remaining coffee cups. I looked out the window over the sink. My garden was a dark, shapeless mass in the moonlight, but I knew every plant, every path. In the morning, I would go out there. I would begin clearing the spare room. I would live my life. The revenge was complete. It had not been a violent upheaval, but a surgical correction. The tumor of disrespect had been excised. The recovery, the healing of the relationship would take time and consistent effort. But the patient was stable. The prognosis was good. I turned off the kitchen light. The house was mine. The narrative was mine. The next chapter finally was mine to write, and I would begin it tomorrow with a pot of coffee and a clear view of the garden.